Hi everyone, welcome back to Tech and Talk and the Minimal API video series. Today we are going to explore more about the map get requests. Previously we have explored only two endpoints. One is to call the root and the other one is to say hi. Let's assume we pick the user's example and we try to write a code, and let me just reuse that code and try to add an endpoint which we'll call users, and inside that endpoint, and by the way we don't need that HTTP context as well to run our request at the moment because we are not using that for now, right? So that would be a function, the callback function, right? At some point we will separate that out into a separate structure, but for now we can go with that one. Okay, slash users will return all the users in our system. For now, let's assume we have a list of users in the system, and for that one I will going to create a class here at the bottom. There is another data type which we call record. So the purpose of record is to transfer the data. That's why we often call that one the DTOs. So I'm not going to use class, I am going to use record because that is a shortcut for our required structure. So let's say we create a record type of record type, and I can name it user. And the best thing about record is the shortcut, right? So I can add the required property here in a kind of constructor format without actually creating the constructor. For now I will take ID and the name of the user, and that single line will return me the record type for user. So I will create a list of user here, and I would like to add few users, and as we know that for the record we use to create objects in the same way that we use for the class. If you want to know details about record, you can check out my separate video. I will try to add this link in the description as well. So the first user, the name is Usman, and I would like to add another user, and I would like to add its name as Salman. Alright, so we have two users at the moment in the system, and I will return those users straight away. So this is our endpoint which is ready. Let me save it, go to the endpoints, and I will try to add another get endpoint, and that would be HTTPS. Instead of that I will just copy paste this one to save the time. That is my users endpoint. For every entry we must need to add the 3 hashes just to separate those requests out in that document. Alright, let me press Ctrl S, run this application for once. Alright, as soon as I click on users, now you can see I am getting those 2 users against that endpoint, which is good. And next thing I would like to add is I want to get user by ID. So these are some common use case I want to run in that minimal API, specifically in those get requests. So I will copy paste this endpoint, expose a new endpoint, and I can say I will expect an ID in that very endpoint, and that ID would be of type int. And as soon as we receive that in, what I want to do is I want to apply a condition on my list, and I want to return only that first record which has that matching ID. So for that I will use first or default, this one. Okay, let me run the application and go back to the endpoint HTTP. Let me copy paste the same endpoint, and let me try to add one. And if I call one, I am getting Usman. If I call something else, I will not have any response. If I pass 2 as an ID, I am getting Salman. So now we are able to pass integer into the get endpoint, and we can now implement get by ID kind of feature in minimal API. Okay, next we can think of if we can pass integer, why not a string? So for that one we can just reuse the previous endpoint, and we can update that one. I will update the input input parameter, and we can pass that string this time. And here in the where condition, we have to use name, and for simplicity, we can just check dot contains. And here we can pass the name this way. So now we can get the user by the name as well. And then for that one, we don't need to call the first of default. We can, it's a kind of use case, but logically if we want to match some strings, we can expect multiple records in response as well. Alright, let me go back to the doc and try to add another endpoint here, and this time I will use let's say Usman, and we don't have that endpoint, and because I haven't built that yet, let me press Ctrl F5, and now let me try. Oh, we are getting that exception. The request matched multiple endpoints. That makes sense. So for that specific, that is a very useful use case. Now the both endpoint looks similar, have same endpoint name and accepting one parameter. Alright, what we can do is we can say get by name, and then we can pass the name for now, and let's see if that works. Get by name and Usman, and if I run that one, now I am getting no records because case is not matched. If I just update you to the cap one, so now I can get a single record. If I only search man, which exists in both names, I will get both the records in the response. So these are a couple of variations for the get request we can try, and we usually face in real-time projects. Alright, so that's all for this episode. We have added few variations for get endpoint. The common one where we want to get some resource through HTTP get request, but we want to get all, get by ID, get by name. We want to search something on the server side. So this is how we can implement those endpoints in the minimal API. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. In case of question, you ask in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to get notified for the future videos on time. So that was all for this video, and stay tuned and happy coding.